There are many extraordinary places on our planet, but you would probably find it hard to imagine that, lost in the middle of the South Pacific, so far away from everything that it does not even appear on most maps, there is a tiny island shrouded in mystery that could soon disappear without a trace. A nation that preserves traditions as provocative as cousin marriage, and where there was so much freedom that women ruled and could even have multiple lovers. A reality that changed radically with the arrival of missionaries. In this new video from Uncensored World, we will discover Niue, the most depopulated country on Earth, where there are more lizards than people and more ghost towns are appearing every year, to the point that it has even been considered putting it up for sale or rent. But as you will now discover, it is also one of the most extraordinary places on the planet. Extraordinary because of unique realities such as it being legal and common for cousins to marry, women being forced to leave the country to give birth, having lost more than 90% of its population in a few years, and being almost entirely controlled by the church. It is a society where female empowerment was so strong that women were the heads of clans, and it is believed that there were sacred caves and communal huts where they were initiated into the act of intimacy guided by priestesses. Until everything changed with the arrival of Christianity, reaching the point where today even dancing sensually is totally forbidden. A region that is home to wonders that border on the unreal, known as the Rock of the Pacific, as the entire island is surrounded by an underwater cliff that drops almost vertically thousands of meters below, with caves where, according to legend, the creation of the world began, or narrow crevices with hand-carved stairs that descend to the heart of the island. Pay attention and don't miss this video, as we are going to discover Niue, a country that, as you will see, could very soon disappear without the world noticing. Let's get started. Hidden among the vast waters of the South Pacific, far from any continent, lies Niue, a nation so isolated that it has lost almost its entire population, so free in the past that it scandalized missionaries, and so invisible that it could soon disappear without anyone noticing. One of the smallest, most isolated, and least populated countries in the world. A nation that seems forgotten by time, and, as you will now discover, by the rest of the planet. Located in the middle of the South Pacific between Tonga, Samoa, and the Cook Islands, Niue is a nation so remote that the nearest landmass is more than 1,500 kilometers away. This lonely island country is not part of any continent, despite being a tiny speck of land measuring just 260 square kilometers, similar in size to the city-state of Malta in Europe, floating in the largest ocean on the planet. A curious fact related to this is that many maps do not even show it, and when they do, it appears as a simple unnamed dot. But as you will soon discover, despite its size, this tiny nation hides a history as impressive as that of many empires. The island of Niue has hardly any inhabitants, so it can be considered the most depopulated country on the planet, with less than 1,600 people living on the island today. This figure has a lot to do with its geographical isolation, but also with massive depopulation that began just a few decades ago. The island is so empty that many already consider it a ghost nation. It is a land that is slowly fading away, as its population leaves and many of its villages become ghost towns, silent ruins that over the years end up being covered by vegetation. The population density is so low in Niue that there are literally more lizards than humans. Some studies estimate that for every person on the island, there are at least 3 reptiles. But these are not just any reptiles. Niue is home to the katuali, a sea snake unique in the world, as poisonous as it is fascinating. This sea cobra only exists in the waters of Niue and usually hides in the crevices of the reefs where it hunts under the sea. But the most amazing thing is that it can breathe through its skin, something extremely rare in its species. Despite its lethality, the locals respect it and have lived with it since ancient times. In addition, several species of geckos and skinks, small tropical lizards, survive on the island's surface, so elusive that they went unnoticed for centuries. Some of them exist nowhere else on the planet. The entire nation of Niue is surrounded by a gigantic reef, making sandy beaches impossible. Instead, these limestone cliffs plunge thousands of kilometers into the depths of the ocean. So if you take a dip at these beaches, within a few meters, you will find yourself floating above a marine abyss that sinks thousands of meters below. This geographical peculiarity was, in fact, one of the reasons why the ancients called it the Rock of the Pacific. You've probably never heard of Niue, a name as curious as the island itself, which means, "Look at the coconut," in its ancestral language. And although it sounds curious, this cry of enthusiasm has deep roots, as the discovery of coconuts in their first harvests represented life, food, and prosperity. The current inhabitants of Niue are descended from the ancient Polynesians, recognized as the most extraordinary navigators known to mankind. The Polynesians did not use compasses or maps, and were able to travel thousands of miles across the open ocean, guided only by the movement of the waves, the stars, and the flight of birds. It is said that they could detect the presence of a nearby island simply by the type of seagulls flying overhead, or knew how to find their way home by following the memory of the wind and the stars. Living in the middle of nowhere, as was the case in Niue, led them to develop a nautical wisdom unique in the world, which has much to do with their origins and unique traditions that they have maintained for centuries. The current language of Niue is English, although many older inhabitants still speak Niuean, a Polynesian language with strong Tongan and Samoan influences. This linguistic change was not natural, but the result of British colonization and later association with New Zealand, a country with which they still maintain a special bond. Among all the links Niue has with New Zealand, there is one particularly puzzling one. No babies are born in this country, literally. And not because there are no pregnancies, but because there is not a single hospital on the entire island equipped to deliver babies. As a result, all pregnant women are forced to leave their homeland weeks before giving birth and travel more than 2,400 kilometers to New Zealand to have their children. As a result, not only are Niueans leaving the island to the point of turning it into a ghost island nation, as you will soon discover, but technically for decades now, no Niueans have been born in Niue. This fact is as shocking as it is symbolic, as the island is not only losing inhabitants due to mass emigration, but also because it is impossible to be born there. This contrasts with the fact that centuries ago, long before the arrival of Europeans, Niue was a much more populated island, largely because it was home to one of the most liberal societies on the planet. For centuries, the women of Niue were the leaders of the clans, made collective decisions, ran the family economy, and were even free to choose their intimate partners without restrictions. It is believed that there were communal huts for intimate initiation rites and sacred caves where young women were guided by priestesses in these rites of passage into adulthood. Far from being seen as immoral, these practices were considered spiritual and essential for the balance of the community. Later in this video, we will explore in detail these traditions, which today may seem unthinkable, but which in their time reflected an empowered society in harmony with its desires. A reality that changed radically with the arrival of Christian missionaries. In the name of morality and progress, they imposed new rules, destroyed ancient rituals, and turned the island into a deeply conservative society. With Christianization also came political ties with New Zealand. And since the 1970s, the population of Niue began to emigrate en masse to that country, seeking better living conditions, healthcare, and education. Today, more than 90% of Niueans live outside their country. As a result, there are more Niueans in New Zealand than on their own island nation. This phenomenon, known as the Great Silent March, is leaving this island deserted in just one generation. Empty houses, closed schools, and deserted roads are the legacy of this exodus that few people know about, and that is slowly depopulating the country. With this, their traditions, language, stories, and legends are also disappearing. But beyond the numbers, reality, and history, you're probably wondering, what's it like to live in a country where there's almost no one left? This is what is happening in Niue. a reality that makes it seem as if time has stood still in many villages, where houses stand empty, gardens grow wild, and schools have closed their doors forever. In this country of paradisiacal beauty, what were once vibrant centers of life are now tropical ghost towns, with silent streets where only the whisper of the wind can be heard. This exodus began a few decades ago, but it shows no signs of stopping. Young people with no educational options on the island are forced to leave in search of a better future. Niue has no universities or higher education centers, so anyone who wants to study must leave the island, and sadly, most do not return. This has turned Niue into a country that is slowly emptying, day after day. But it is not only young people who are leaving the island. Many women are also seeking to escape, often forming relationships with foreign tourists in the hope of building a different future outside Niue. This reality has marked the social life of the island, where the lack of opportunities and resources pushes them to seek options beyond its borders. Women, as you now know, face a particular reality. Since there are no hospitals to give birth, pregnant women must travel to New Zealand to give birth, hundreds of kilometers away, which makes it even more difficult for new generations to put down roots in their homeland, and means that many of these families never return. There have been many attempts to reverse this trend, but they have always been unsuccessful. The lack of services, opportunities, and resources keeps the island trapped in a spiral of neglect. Economically, Niue is also almost entirely dependent on foreign aid. More than 80% of the national budget comes from New Zealand and other international donations. This support is vital for the island to function, but it is also a reminder of its vulnerability and dependence. Interestingly, Niue was the first country in the world to offer free Wi-Fi throughout its territory. However, the ambitious project failed due to a lack of maintenance and resources to sustain it, something that has a lot to do with the country's economic dependence. Today, internet access in Niue is expensive and limited, another factor that makes it difficult for residents to stay and for local development to take place. This combination of problems has given rise to surprising rumors and realities, as there has been talk on more than one occasion of selling or leasing the island to international investors. An idea that is almost surreal but reflects the gravity of the situation. In the past, the option of leasing Niue for extended periods was considered, with proposals in the range of several million New Zealand dollars, aimed mainly at foreign investors interested in turning the island into an exclusive tourist destination or a private retreat. However, these ideas clashed with the reality that few would be willing to stay permanently in a place with few services, limited job opportunities, and a population that is shrinking every day. In addition, the local community rejected the idea, expressing concern about the possibility of losing their identity and sovereignty and refusing to become mere private property. With the sovereignty of this country in mind, a very peculiar event took place in Niue a few years ago. In the early 2000s, a foreign man attempted to proclaim himself King of Niue, claiming ancestral rights to the territory. His independent monarchy project was short-lived, as he was quickly expelled by local authorities, but it made it clear how easy it can be to question the sovereignty of an almost empty country. This danger is not only political, as climate change threatens Niue like few other places on Earth. Science assures us that if sea levels rise significantly, the cliffs and coasts of this country could quickly disappear under the water. Furthermore, if New Zealand decides one day to cut off financial aid, Niue could cease to exist as a country without the world hardly noticing. In this almost empty land, where villages become ghost towns and young people emigrate without return, even love and relationships have to change in a very radical way. So much so that it makes us ask, would you marry your cousin if there were no other option? You're probably wondering why we're asking this question. But this is what happens in Niue, a country where traditions and necessity have created needs that are different from the rest of the world, which we are now going to explore in depth. One of the most surprising and controversial traditions on this island is that it is legal and very common for cousins to marry in Niue. This reality shows us that it is not simply a cultural issue, but above all, a necessity to adapt to a remote environment with an increasingly smaller population. Because of this, there are only a handful of different surnames in this country, and practically everyone knows each other, even the most intimate details of their neighbors' lives. This extreme closeness creates a community where privacy is almost non-existent, and relationships are intertwined, forming a very closed social network that further reinforces the practice of marrying close relatives, not only out of tradition, but also for pure social and demographic survival. This surprising reality contrasts sharply with the strict religious control that dominates the island today, imposing prohibitions even on such everyday and human acts as dancing or expressing oneself freely. This was not always the case, as in the past. Before the arrival of missionaries, women not only had an important social role, but were the true heads of clans, leading and making crucial decisions for their communities. These warrior women and leaders not only ruled their clans, but exercised real matriarchal power, something uncommon even in Polynesian societies. They were the ones who decided on the distribution of land, alliances with other clans, and the internal rules of the community. Their authority was unquestionable, and they were often attributed with almost sacred power. Their power even went beyond politics and family, as women controlled the sacred knowledge and rituals that marked life on the island. Because of this, there were priestesses, guardians of ancestral wisdom, who guided young women in initiation rituals in sacred caves and specially prepared huts, which some still believe are practiced today. These secret places, full of mystery, not only marked the arrival of adulthood, but were also related to intimate life and female empowerment, a freedom that may seem revolutionary today. In addition to all this, the family structure in Niue was very different from what we expect today. It was not uncommon for a woman to have several lovers or husbands in open relationships that were part of complex social and spiritual rituals. These unions were not only accepted, but were considered a way of strengthening bonds and maintaining harmony within the clan. These acts were part of a culture that viewed the body, sensuality, and intimate life very differently from the Western norm. It was a system where female power was unquestionable, and women dictated the rules of social interaction, sexuality, and spirituality. But all this changed radically when missionaries arrived with a Bible in hand, preaching conversion to save souls. Missionaries brought new rules, prohibitions, and strict morals that clashed head-on with these ancestral traditions. At this point, before going into detail about how the arrival of Christianity forever transformed the country's culture, we would like to ask you, would you marry your cousin if there was no one else? What do you think of the changes brought about by the missionaries? Do you think life was better before or after their arrival? Pause the video for a moment and leave us a like if you're enjoying it, along with your comments. You know that's the best way to support us and be part of Uncensored World. So, thank you. As we mentioned, since the arrival of the missionaries to the present day, almost the entire island is under the control of the Christian religion. Because of this, there are strict prohibitions that were incomprehensible years ago, such as punishing sensuality, to the point that certain traditional dances are banned and body language is monitored to prevent any behavior that the church considers inappropriate. With all this, many traditional practices, which were once a source of pride and freedom, were eliminated or demonized, branded as pagan or immoral, and with that, women lost their dominant role, and their power was replaced by a patriarchal model imposed from outside. This cultural change was profound and painful, transforming a free and matriarchal society into a much more rigid and conservative one. But despite all this transformation and so many difficulties, this country continues to hide natural wonders that seem to be from another planet, and now you are going to discover them, before learning about one of the most mysterious and macabre realities that have occurred in this remote corner of the planet. If you are passionate about these stories, forgotten cultures, and the secrets that the world tries to hide, don't forget to subscribe to Uncensored World. As you can see, here you will find exclusive research and in-depth content that you won't find anywhere else. Plus, if you want to support this work and access special material, you can become a member today. Being part of our community means being part of the unfiltered truth, and it helps us continue exploring and sharing stories like this one. Returning to this natural paradise, as you already know, the entire island is surrounded by a gigantic underwater cliff that plunges into the ocean, forming a natural barrier that prevents the formation of sandy beaches and further isolates it from the outside world. This geographical peculiarity has led Niue to be nicknamed the Rock of the Pacific because it looks like a floating fortress anchored to an impregnable underwater cliff. Among these cliffs and chasms are sacred caves that, according to legend, hold ancient secrets about the creation of the world. One of the most impressive is a Vaiki Cave, a mystical grotto where the waters are so crystal clear that they look like a mirror between dimensions, reflecting not only the sky but also stories and myths passed down through generations. It is said that this is where it all began, and that the spirit of the island still lives within these pure waters. A few kilometers from this cave, the Talava Arches cliff rises majestically like a mythological portal to the end of the world. Its natural limestone formations, eroded by centuries of wind and sea, look like giant arches opening the way to another plane, a place where reality blurs and imagination takes over. Niue also has a narrow crevice between the rocks, where villagers still descend today via hand-carved stairs to reach a freshwater well hidden in the depths, as if they were descending into the very heart of the island, in a place known as Anapala Chasm. Niue's unspoiled nature is another of its most precious treasures. Its seabed is unique in the world. Vibrant coral reefs and fluorescent corals that seem to light up the night underwater, creating a spectacle that can only be described as magical. This marine biodiversity has made Niue a paradise for diving enthusiasts, although it is little known and even more difficult to reach due to its isolation. But it is not only natural beauty that this nation hides. Among these caves and rock formations, archaeologists discovered human remains a few years ago, precisely aligned in underground chambers. These findings, which date back to pre-colonial times, have raised many unanswered questions. Some think they could be sacrificial rituals, others believe they may be tribal burials, and there are even those who whisper the hidden fear that these traditions hide dark stories of disappearances caused by a strange creature, hidden among the waters and jungles of this enigmatic country, which may be the cause of it all. A legend that may have something to do with the present, as the population continues to dwindle and the island continues to empty, to the point of becoming a ghost country, a territory that threatens to disappear from the map without the world hardly noticing. With this in mind, and before this happens, at Uncensored World we have investigated how you can visit Niue and enjoy its incredible nature, culture, and mystery in the best possible way. Because, although the island may seem like an enigma lost in time, it deserves to be discovered and remembered. As you will see, even if the world forgets it, perhaps you never will. Niue is a small, remote island in the South Pacific, which means that it is not as easy to get to as other tourist destinations. There are no direct flights to Niue from Europe, so the most common way to get there is to fly first to New Zealand, usually to Auckland. From Auckland, there are regular flights to Niue, mainly operated by the national airline. The flight from Auckland takes around 3.5 hours. From America, especially from the west coast of the United States, the route also usually goes via Auckland, or in some cases, via neighboring islands in the Pacific that connect to New Zealand. For most tourists from Europe and the Americas, Niue does not require a visa for short stays, generally up to 30 days, as long as the purpose is tourism. All you need is a valid passport with at least 6 months validity upon entry. With an area of just 200 square kilometers, getting around is very easy. The best way to get around is by renting a car, as public transportation is almost non-existent, and the distances between points of interest are short but scattered. Renting a car costs between $35 and $50 per day, depending on the vehicle and the season. The island has paved roads in good condition, but it is important to drive on the left, as in New Zealand and Australia. Bicycles can also be used for short trips, although the slopes and climate can make this a little challenging. Niue is a relatively expensive destination due to its isolation and the need to import many products. Prices in shops and restaurants are generally high compared to the global average. For example, dinner for two at a simple restaurant can cost between $45 and $60, while a coffee costs around $3 to $4. A night in a mid-range hotel for two people costs between $90 and $110, although there are more basic options and also some more luxurious ones. In terms of safety, Niue is one of the safest destinations in the Pacific. The crime rate is very low, and the inhabitants are known for being friendly and hospitable. However, due to its isolation, it is essential to bring basic medications with you and ensure you have comprehensive travel insurance. In addition, internet connections and mobile coverage can be limited outside the capital, so it is advisable to plan your communications carefully. At Uncensored World, we hope this video has helped you discover Niue, as you have seen, one of the most fascinating and unknown gems on the planet. If you agree with us that the real world often surpasses fiction, don't forget to subscribe to Uncensored World, and don't miss the next video, where we show you one of the most fascinating and unknown corners of the planet. Click now, because what you're about to see will surprise you.